Greetings, Exile. If you know me from POE 1, you probably already know that I'm a bleed maniac. I've crafted several bleed builds in the past, and despite my horrible experience with Warrior last league, this time, things are looking way better. We finally have spears, weapons that are actually compatible with bleed builds. And with so many new bleed-related skills coming in Dawn of the Hunt, you can bet your ass I'm league starting as a bleed character, whether that's Warrior or Huntress. But that's a discussion for another time. This time, I want to talk about a very specific upcoming keystone that caught my attention in the patch notes. Crimson Assault. This keystone will be located southeast of the Ranger and Huntress starting area and has a very unique effect. Any bleeding we inflict will be aggravated, but its duration is set to just 1 second. At first glance, some might think, sweet, now bleed will deal its full damage in just 1 second. But that couldn't be further from the truth. If that were the case, this keystone would be completely busted. So why doesn't it work that way? To understand, let's break down how bleeding actually works. When a hit inflicts bleeding, it deals 15% of the physical hit as damage per second for 5 seconds, totaling 75% of the hit's physical damage over time, assuming no ailment magnitude or more damage multipliers are applied to it. For example, if you hit for 100 physical damage and inflict bleeding, the target will take 15 damage per second for 5 seconds, which is 75 total bleed damage. However, Crimson Assault reduces bleed-based duration to 1 second instead of 5. This means the other 4 seconds of bleed damage are lost. So instead of 75 total damage, you'd only deal 15 damage in 1 second. But since the bleed is aggravated, it will be 30 damage over time instead of 15. As any bleed that is aggravated deals 100% increased damage for that instance. Now, let's talk about some good and bad scenarios where allocating this keystone might help, or completely backfire. First, let's talk about a bad scenario. If you're using a slow but hard-hitting skill like Hammer of the Gods, which was a fan favorite for bleed builds last league and arguably the only reliable one, then Crimson Assault is a terrible choice. Why? Because normally, bleed deals 15% of your physical hit damage per second for 5 seconds, meaning a total of 75% damage over time. But with Crimson Assault, only the first 30% aggravated instance is applied, and the remaining 45% is lost since the bleed duration is locked at 1 second. Now let's talk about a good scenario. On the other hand, if you're using a fast-hitting skill like Rapid Assault and can stay consistently on top of your target, this keystone can actually work in your favor. Instead of dealing 15% bleed damage per second on hit, you'll now deal 30% bleed damage per second on hit. This means if you keep landing hits, your overall damage output per second will be significantly higher compared to a normal bleed build. Lastly, let me tell you a way to completely flip Crimson Assault to your advantage, by stacking bleed duration. If you invest in enough ailment or bleed duration scaling and push the duration to 3 seconds somehow, you would increase bleed damage from 75% to 90%, while still benefiting from a shorter overall duration. This would make Crimson Assault a direct buff in all situations, as you'd deal more damage in nearly half the time. Now, I'm not a mathematical genius, so I might be wrong about some things. Also, keep in mind that I didn't factor in ailment magnitudes or more damage multipliers in any of the scenarios I mentioned. So if you think I messed up somewhere or there are inconsistencies in my theory, feel free to take a jab at me. Trust me, I don't bite. If you found this information useful, make sure to like, subscribe, and maybe even ring that notification bell. As always, thanks for watching Exile.